Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Hello.
Hello.
And somebody.
Hello, Doc.
Okay, I wanted somebody to confirm that you are hearing. Are you all hearing well?
We can hear, Prof.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Welcome to this lecture, and I hope we shall be able to conclude the discussions on systematic literature review today. I have my two colleagues online. I just want to confirm whether they are there and they are listening. I've given you co-host rights. Joseph Elasu, are you there?
Yes, Prof. I'm on.
Fantastic, great. Charles Olupot, are you there?
I'm here, Prof.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. And welcome to this session. I know that last time you were unable to join us, but today you are with us. But in case we are unable to cover what we are supposed to cover today, then we shall extend the session to another day so that we actually have possibly the fourth session. I know that the kind of things, the practical things that you will be taking us through usually require some good time for people to grasp, since they actually involve hands-on. But anyway, we shall see how we move. And the objective is that members, or those who are attending this session today and those who attended last time, should be able to do this on their own. It's not something that you simply cram and you wait for an opportunity to reproduce. No. The objective of giving you this information is for you to utilize it and write papers, and if possible, publish those papers. I do not have to overemphasize the importance of systematic literature review because we all know what it is, and I have taken you through systematic literature review in the last two lectures lasting over 2 hours. So we've utilized about 5 hours now, or 4.5 hours, looking at systematic literature review. And today we'll have another 2 or 2.5 hours, and then we shall make a decision as to whether we should have other sessions or not. My facilitation today will not be long because I've already said most of the things that I wanted to say. I want to take up around 30 or 40 minutes, and Charles and Elasu will take possibly the other 2 hours, or probably 1.5 hours. But just as a way of recap, I introduced systematic literature review and how we conduct systematic literature review. And this has been the order of presentation. So I gave you the introduction, the importance of good literature review. We went to the purpose of literature review. We looked at the typology of reviews, and then we had a comparison between systematic and traditional reviews. And then we looked at the aims of a systematic literature review and the process of writing a systematic literature review in business. That's where we stopped around number 6. And today I want to complete number 6, 7, and 8 in around 30 minutes. As you may have at least appreciated from the previous 2 lectures, especially after taking you through the traditional literature review and the systematic literature review, and drawing a distinction between the two in form of a table that you see there, we saw salient features that are very important when we are conducting systematic literature review. It's not really a random walk. For that matter, But as we see today, you must have a methodology. So in other words, you must start with clear-cut objectives or research questions, and the whole process is structured and is supposed to be transparent and really very, very objective, because it is guided by some kind of methodology and research questions, unlike the traditional literature review, which is very, very subjective. And of course, usually people who select literature use their what we call they use their hunch, their intuition, to determine the papers that they are going to review and possibly how they are going to review them. Now, in the traditional, so in the systematic literature review, that is not so, right? So it's quite important for us to know that. And I remember taking you through the steps, and these are very important. Step number one, stage number one is planning the review. And under that review, as we saw last time, we must identify the need, and those are the objectives that you actually set up, or what we call the research questions that you pose. And these are very important. And I think at the time when you are thinking about your research or probably your PhD work or research proposal, it's advisable that you pose those particular questions that will help you address salient or major issues in your PhD work. And that's why sometimes we prefer that you ask questions that relate to conceptualization, questions that relate to how far research has advanced in that area in terms of the theories that have been used by scholars, in terms of the paradigms and perspectives that have been utilized, and of course, frameworks as well, if they do exist. And of course, you need to look at how knowledge has progressed in that area, right? And once you do that process very well, you'll be able to tell how many journal articles have been published, for example, in the different parts of the world. For example, Africa, Asia, America, Europe, and that kind of thing. And you can always count those particular papers, and you can even draw graphs to demonstrate what has been done and what needs to be done. So identifying the need for the review is very important. And I did tell you that's quite important for you to find out whether there's already a systematic literature review that has been conducted in your area covering the topic that you are investigating. If certain areas have been addressed, then there's no need for you to pose similar questions. And of course, as I did indicate, you can start with Google Scholar, and then you go to the various databases that exist, right? That will really tell you how far you should go in terms of the systematic literature review that you're undertaking. The second part, which is B, developing the protocol, and that's where we stopped, if you recall. I did tell you that the protocol outlines the parameters for the data search, right? Because you not go on the internet and begin searching everything that exists on the internet. As I did say last time, some of the publications are actually classified as trash. Some of the publications that are available on the internet in that category of trash. So not everything that exists is quite important and useful for your research, right? Now, of course, you need to come up with a comprehensive protocol, and your comprehensive protocol should deal with the search strings. And here, when I say search, I mean search, S-E-A-R-C-H, search strings. I know we pronounce these words differently, depending on the kind of training that we have received in the past. So that's why I need to let you know the type of word that I'm talking about, because somebody might think it is SUCH. So the search strings are very important. So your protocol must be very comprehensive in dealing with the strings, the search strings, the databases that you intend to visit and examine. The criteria for including or excluding literature is quite important. So that's why you must come up with the inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria, right? And of course the quality control aspect must also be thought about carefully, right? But again, as you talk about the protocol that deals with the inclusion and exclusion of literature, right? Remember, there are some worthy articles, there are some worthy books, and sometimes publications that will exist in various libraries, like in the case of Uganda. If you are in the area of finance or economics, you'll find publications in the Bank of Uganda, publications in the Ministry of Finance, or even publications by World Bank and other international agencies, WOBOS and the rest. Now, some of these journal articles or write-ups or publications are very useful, but you need to take a decision as to whether you are going to include what you call gray literature or not, as I did indicate last time. You know what gray literature is and what it isn't. But again, you need to be very, very strategic and very careful in what you will include in your research and what you're going to exclude, right? So as I did also indicate last time, when you are coming up with the review, with the protocol, right? Review protocol, systematic review protocol, you shouldn't consider that review protocol to be set in stone, right? But rather that every time you feel you want to include some changes here and there, you should be able to introduce them, and you should be able to mention those particular aspects that you have included. So they must be protocoled in this case. Of course, as I said, we have been advised by various scholars who have attempted to undertake comprehensive systematic literature reviews to search for all available literature on the internet, to search for literature that exists as journal articles and books and conference papers, and also gray literature, right? But of course, the decision will be yours at the end of the day to either include conference papers or gray literature or not. So you will be able to think about those working papers. May I request those whose mics are not muted to mute, please? Otherwise, we have some bit of disturbances here and there, right? So those are some of the things that you'll have to make a decision on. Right, so we usually prefer that you really start with the peer-reviewed journal articles, and those peer-reviewed journal articles are usually checked through the academic process. We know that the other publications are not checked, but we begin with published journal articles. Now, of course, again, depending on the keyword strings that you would have created for the review protocol, you might be able to access many publications, or probably very few, and that's why you must be very, very careful with the key strings that you select, right? So of course, after you've done a first search, right, you need to cross-read through some articles. And of course, once you read through very fast, you'll be able to identify missing keywords for the search strings, because you may not have all the search strings. You may not have all the words or the keywords. But once you go to the internet and you search through, you'll be able to see some of the words that are very close to the topic that you are investigating. I mean, so that at the end of the day, you have as many journal articles as possible. I'll give you an example. If you are, for example, undertaking a study in the area of entrepreneurship, and you are dealing with a construct like corporate entrepreneurship, right? If you go to the internet, certainly you'll find many journal articles that have utilized the word corporate entrepreneurship, but you shouldn't forget that even the word intrapreneurship deals with more or less the same topic, right? But of course, you'll see that these are completely different keywords. If you use intrapreneurship, right, without using corporate entrepreneurship, you miss out those journal articles that have used the words corporate entrepreneurship. So you need to really look for those words that are very, very similar so that you do not miss those journal articles. So as the author of your piece of work, you have to be careful, right? So that you find all the necessary literature. And of course, for you to be able to do so, you should identify more keywords. You should have, you should make consultations with the experts in the topic, right? Or in the field where you intend to undertake the research. But you can also look for synonyms, right, for those particular variables, right? And thank God, when you go to the when you use your computer, right, you'll be able to discover synonyms to most of the words that you would pick interest in. And you must be very careful there, because not all synonyms actually do make sense in that case, right? Especially if you have a host of variables making up a construct, right? For example, if you like the example we used last week, somebody was looking at energy transition communication, right? So you have energy transition, and then you have energy transition communication, and so forth. So again, depending on how you look at those words, you may not get one single word that represents the three words. So you must be very creative, and of course, very, very careful, and have a little bit of patience so that you don't rush. Otherwise, you may end up crashing at the end of the day, right? So I think that's very important. Maybe the other thing I should mention here, under protocol for business management, we suggest that you include literature that is published at least at the level of a C journal, right, on the list of the Association of Business Schools, right? The Australian Association of Business Schools and other business schools have come up with a list of journals, and they have classified those journals as category A, category B, category C, category D, and so forth. So here, if you don't have too many journal articles to review, then the minimum should be C, category C, right? And that will help you ensure that the journal articles you are reviewing at least have a certain level of credibility, right? And that the findings that you'll come up with will be very, very useful, right? So if you combine those major journal rankings, then your process will be very transparent and reliable, so that you really come up with the papers that are very useful. Right, allow me now to proceed and take you to stage number 3, extracting and synthesizing data, right? Once you've worked on, you've worked around stage 1, you've planned your review, you have identified the need for the review, and you have very clear-cut objectives or research questions, then you develop a protocol, right? And the protocol will help you achieve a number of things. First of all, you'll be able to search, right? You'll be able to pick as many journal articles as possible. The issues of quality in terms of the journals obtained and reviewed, that will be catered for, plus a number of other things. Now you move to another stage of identifying studies and evaluating studies, right? So this is an important step, right? As I said earlier on, if you recall, last week I told you that it's always important to read the titles and read the abstracts, right? And if need arises, you can actually go to the body of the paper. Right, don't simply save anything you find on the internet, because you might be saving garbage or rubbish, right? So of course, when we are dealing with the systematic literature review, the data extraction process has to be systematic and transparent, right? So at level number 3, which we've called identifying, right? Sorry, I think I'd moved to step number 3 without covering step number 2, right? I think I covered number 2, evaluating studies. Okay, let me just, sorry, I'd move to stage number 3, conducting the data extraction. Stage number 2, you identify and evaluate studies, right? And of course, here the identification of studies for the review will be based on the topics that you are handling, and the topics that have been handled by previous scholars. And of course, in your case, as I did indicate, it's important to concentrate on papers that have been published by major scholars in your areas. So we encourage you to concentrate on electronic databases and peer-reviewed journal articles only. And of course, once you do that, that will help you to ensure the highest standards of transparency. Right, so don't rate these things by yourself, but make sure that you follow the guidelines that I gave you earlier on. So I think now I can move to step number 3. As I said, I am just giving you an overview, and my colleagues will be taking you through some of these things practically. We now move to stage number 3, extracting and synthesizing data, right? And that has 2 sub-steps. 1, conducting data extraction, and 2, conducting data synthesis, right? So when you are dealing with the data extraction, your data extraction, as I said earlier on, should be very transparent and should be systematic, right? It's not a haphazard process, as Charles will be showing us and Erasu. It is very, very systematic, right? And once you use the right data extraction strings, right, then it will be quite easy for you to pick this information and be able to construct knowledge around that particular theme or that particular construct that you are studying. So in this case, you as the author or the writer, you have to describe the data, right, that you are going to use for the extraction in the review protocol. And of course, also create an extraction sheet at the beginning, right? And I'm sure these extraction sheets will be shown to us today, if time allows, right? Now, this sheet, right, or the protocol and the sheet can always be adapted if important issues arise during the extraction, because there are certain things that you may not be able to see, and some words, right, may not be at your disposal until you start extracting information. So as you are reading through, right, as you are searching through the journal articles, you'll be able to meet some important words that you will include. So you can actually go back and change the data extraction sheet and protocol, right? Now, of course, whenever you make any change in those in the protocol and the data extraction sheet, right, these changes must be noted, right? So, I mean, so that you really avoid confusion at the end of the day. That's why I told you that the process is very systematic, right? Now, of course, during this process of extraction, as we know, right, the authors may be biased a little bit, and when they are biased, they bring in what we call the data extraction bias, and it's very difficult to really eliminate this 100%, because as a researcher, you have a direction that you are taking, right? And there are certain things that you are looking out for. So there's a tendency for you to be overly taken up by this, right? But you need to be aware of the data extraction bias, and then try to eliminate or reduce that bias, right? Now, and of course, for you to be able to overcome this bias, you need to be very careful with the data, right, that you're extracting, so that you don't miss out important data, right? Because if you miss out very important data, and then at the end of the day, what you'll come up with may not be very, very, very representative. So, and as we can see, the actual data extraction, remember, we are studying primarily, we are studying studies that have been published, right? But studies with primary data, right? These are primary studies. So now the actual process of data extraction will depend on the studies, right, that relates to the research question or research questions that you have posed. And that's why, as we saw, stage number 1, under planning the review, we have identifying the need, and under this need is where you develop your research questions, right, or probably research objectives. And these are the ones that should guide the data extraction, right? And in this case, as we shall see, tables are considered a useful support to help you really create an overview and a transparent matrix for the synthesis that you are attempting to come up with at the end of the day. And this table should contain a number of things and necessary information which will help you do the synthesis very well. And of course, every paper that you review, right, needs to be outlined in this table, right, so that we know that this paper has been looked at, and the kind of information that has been extracted is this and the other. So if you come up with a very nice table, then you have most of those journal articles summarized in that table. We'll be showing this practically and how you can do it. You know, sometimes it's quite easy for us to talk about these things, right, in abstract terms. But when it comes to the actual practice, life becomes a little bit hard. You say, well, I heard him talk about this, but we don't know how this is going to be done. Fortunately, we are going to do these things practically. The other aspect is conducting the synthesis, data synthesis. That's the second stage, second level under stage 3. You conduct the synthesis. Now, this data synthesis is one of the most important steps in writing a systematic literature review. If you don't have a synthesis, then you have no business in writing one, right? Because you don't know what you're writing about. And as we know, these systematic literature reviews really analyze and compare existing literature, right? So at this level, we don't encourage you to just summarize the literature, right? But you try to compare the existing literature and also analyze the existing literature. I'll give you an example that I think I used it last week, if you recall, that if, for example, scholars do not agree about certain things in terms of conceptualization and in terms of, or even the definitions, right? There are different definitions. So you may wish to start by undertaking a systematic literature review so that you see the definitions that exist about a particular construct, so that you can come up with one that is probably inclusive, right? That's a little bit broad, a definition that covers most of the things. So in such situations, you will be noting those definitions, but you'll be seeing what one definition emphasizes and what misses out, that kind of thing. By the time you complete analyzing, in this case, maybe 100 journal articles, you'll be having a definition that is more comprehensive and more useful in that case. So we don't simply summarize the literature here, but we analyze data from these journal articles, and we compare these aspects, right, in which we pick from the various journal articles. Now, of course, we know that if you try to pick many journals, especially if you use strings that will allow you to get so many hits, as many as 1 million or 2 millions, right? And even when you try to narrow down or use the exclusion criteria and inclusion criteria, you end up with around 600 etc., right? You may find difficulties really analyzing 600 journal articles, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done. It can be done, right? So look at those particular constructs that are very important, those particular methodologies that are very important, that will enable you to have as many journal articles, but also at the end of the day, be able to reduce on those number, excuse me, journal articles, right? So the objectivity here is very important, as I've been emphasizing, as I showed you on the other table, where we compare traditional literature review and systematic literature review, right? So you must have an objective, you must undertake an objective view, right, of the literature that exists in that case, right? But again, reducing on the bias, right? Now, of course, stage number 4, which is our last stage. In this case, I don't think we have, let me just see here. Stage number 4 is disseminating the review findings, right? Of course, as we saw last time, systematic literature review is located very high on the level of evidence hierarchy, right? And in most cases, people will tend to believe the information presented in the systematic literature review because it brings together research that has been conducted in various environments and various fields, but relating to the same constructs in this case, right? So we see here that while a lot of empirical papers attempt to deal with the specific situations, the systematic literature review article combines, right, and synthesizes a lot of studies, and it helps to create evidence based information or evidence informed information, right? And of course, the dissemination here becomes very important, very relevant. So you'll either disseminate this information by publishing a paper, or probably by having it, by making a presentation, maybe during a policy dialogue somewhere. But of course, at the end of the day, you must be having an objective why you are undertaking this review, right? So in business management, usually these reviews target policymakers, target managers, and they also target fellow researchers, right? And those are the people who have interest in the journal articles that we publish. Simumba, unfortunately, I don't know whether you are sleeping, but you are making noise. I've just tried to turn off your mic. Kindly help us turn off your mic. So as I conclude, that was step number 4. Then the general settings, these are very important. The reviewing team, the structure of a review, and the number of articles, these are very important things. Of course, in research, we know that few articles are single authored. These days, people work as a team. And I want to encourage you, if you're going to undertake systematic literature review, to think about the reviewing team, right? You can do it maybe in a team of around 3 people. Even when you are doing your PhD, if you work as a team, somebody might be working on, someone might be working on, let's say, innovations, technological innovations. Another one might be working on constructs, like energy transitions, and another one is working on something totally different. It doesn't matter in this case, because your colleague might be very good when it comes to data extraction, right? Or when it comes to using some of the software packages like the EndNote and so forth. So if for you are very good in locating these studies and summarizing the studies, doing the preliminaries, right? And the other one is very good, so you do so, right? So that after completing his task and what is remaining probably is writing, you also move on to your area and you work on your PhD thesis. I'm not saying that you should be very lazy and start using people to do your work. No, I'm just saying that here we have strengths and weaknesses, right? At the end of the day, you own your PhD, right? It's in your area, and you must learn all these things. But where you have weaknesses, you can actually seek assistance of your colleague who might be very good in that area. So that's why even when it comes to publication, journal publications, very few journal articles are are authored by one person, right? They're not single authored. People work as a team. So a strong team increases the value of a paper, because the team can be seen as pre-reviewers. When you write your draft, send it to your colleague will critique, will dismiss a few things here and add a few things there and so forth. So they are more or less working as reviewers at that point, but they're also adding something to the paper, right? And in this case, my suggestion is that you should have a heterogeneous team, heterogeneous in terms of age, and of course, possibly constituted through a balance between more experienced scholars and young researchers, and a combination of those who are doing their PhDs and those who have just completed, and maybe also supervisors. If you have a supervisor who can contribute to a paper, that would be very good. So you co-publish with your supervisor, right? And of course, at the end of the day, the paper will be very strong. I don't really mean people who wait for to see their names added on the paper, right? Those ones and are not don't contribute anything, right? At the end of the day, they just celebrate the achievements of others, right? And when they themselves cannot do it, right? So that's why I encourage even you, when you complete your PhDs tomorrow, please try to do some of these things either with your students that you are supervising and others, but make sure that you contribute to the work that they are publishing, so that you pick the ideas and you pick the skill, and once you have the skill, nobody will ever take it away from you, right? So I think that is really in terms of the reviewing team. Now the structure of the review, that is how the paper should be structured. Joseph should be able to give you that structure, but maybe I'll tell you that the general structure of a review article is very similar to an empirical article. It starts with an introduction to motivate the topic, and it deals with its contributions to research and practice. So that introduction chapter will always be there. Then from there, the article then deals with the methodology of and the synthesis of the literature that has been reviewed. This is then followed by a discussion section and a conclusion, right? But although I've given you those particular aspects, that structure is not very compulsory. It can always be adopted, right? In other words, it can be domesticated. You can introduce a few things. For example, in many of the business management systematic literature reviews, I have always seen authors including an extra section after the introduction in order to provide more background information about the theoretical underpinnings of the topic before dealing with the methodology. So that is more or less very close to a literature review section, right? And then thereafter, they try to organize the paper very similarly to an empirical paper. So of course, that is what it is. Now, let's look at the number of articles, right? Now, I know last time somebody asked me how many journal articles. I remember I attempted to answer that. But systematic literature review is dependent on existing data. That is previous research on the topic. So it's not like there is where you have respondents, sorry, a population of around 10 million people. And then you must make a decision to choose 300 or 200 or 150, and how you are going to choose that randomly. When it comes to systematic literature review, it depends on the journal articles that have been published in the area. And this will vary from paper to paper. In some topics, you have 1 million hits. Others, you've got around 500 journal articles, while others you have about 70 or 100. And when you use the inclusion and exclusion criteria, you end up with around 60, maybe, or 50, right? So, of course, that is quite important. And of course, you need to know that. So we don't have answers that we cram and say, well, like in statistics where you say your aim for you to be able to undertake meaningful and statistical estimations, your N, probably your observations for normal distribution around 30, maybe for some software packages, you are talking about 60. If you're going to use Liesel, right, or probably Amos, you must have around 200 cases and above, right? And if you're using the partial least squares, you're going to have as low as around 15 observations or even 10 observations, right? But again, you need to read. Recently I was reviewing a paper where I'm an associate editor, right? I sent the paper for review. This researcher had used the partial least squares, and he had a sample size of around 45. And both reviewers had actually said that the sample size used by the author wasn't correct, because N must be large, around 200 cases, right? Now, of course, what I gathered at that material time was that these reviewers were not very familiar with the partial squares. So again, in order to safeguard the integrity and not to take the decisions entirely without having another view, I had to seek an opinion of a third reviewer who was able to agree with me, and I had to write to the authors, telling them what they should, but also indicating that they don't have to worry very much about the comment on the sample size. So again, you need to read a lot, right? Because we know that those ideas are there, because I've seen some scholars claiming that you must have hundreds of articles, right? And others say that even 100 articles is not enough, right, to qualify for systematic literature review. Right, so those are the things that I think are very important in terms of the general settings, right? Now, as I move towards concluding, right, there are certain things that are very important. As you can see, in this case, in recent years, we know that systematic literature reviews have become really important and popular in business management literature, right? And of course, we see many, many journal articles that have started publishing these papers, right? The other thing, as I said earlier on, while a systematic literature review can be a standalone paper, right? Which will allow you to answer a certain research question or objective, but it can also be part of a major research project, right? Like a dissertation where you handle certain objectives. Right, I think in the interest of time, let me stop there and hand over to my colleagues, and then thereafter I'll just come in to answer a few questions, right? But if you have a question, as I unshare or I stop the share here, you can ask so that I will give time to Joseph and Charles to, if they have slides to share. Any question or comment? Any question or comment, please? Any question or comment? Dr. Austin Mwange, you are welcome. Last week, you were unable to speak because of the internet. I don't know whether your internet is okay now, so that I give you an opportunity to speak before Charles and Joseph come in.
Can you hear me, Prof?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted you to first thank you so much, Professor, for these lectures. We're actually learning a lot. So I wanted to find out on when you do a search on the topic that you maybe want to uncover and so forth, would you, under exclusion, would there be a limit to say, no, you should leave it open, or you can say articles from such and such a year and so forth, looking at the number of articles others may demand? Or just leave it open if it's financial inclusion? among youths or just financial inclusion in general, you just leave it like, or you can focus on articles that are named for a certain period, because in these other types of literature, you find that you are told that no, you need articles that are less than 5 years, that are less than a certain duration of time, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll respond to that question partly or partially. And I know last time somebody asked a similar question. And then I'll leave it to Joseph and Charles. Joseph, are you on?
Yes, Prof.
Okay,
I'm
great. On. Okay. Now, Dr. Mwange, I think what you are saying is pertinent. We have heard over the years, especially in the traditional literature reviews, that you should really review literature published in the last 5 years. Like now, if we are in 2023, possibly the cutoff is 2018. 2018 to 2023, those are the journal articles that you will review, right? But remember, at that level, you are going to your study is very huge, and you are going to collect data from the field. You still have a lot of work to do, right? Now, when we do systematic literature reviews, we really limit ourselves in terms of the journal articles that exist and the quality of the articles that we have. So we have other considerations. Let me just give you an example. And I'll use, I remember when I was studying resilience, I did resilience for my PhDs years back. And when I went to the internet to look for related journal articles, guess what I found? I discovered that the word resilience was almost non-existent in the organizational or business management literature. Almost non-existent, almost non-existent. So the journal articles I found then were in family studies, where you find divorce, right? And then the children are traumatized, or probably the spouses are traumatized, and then they must bounce back from that kind of trauma, right? So I found a number of studies in that area. Then I found also studies in humanitarian logistics, where you have earthquake survivors, right? If the area has been hit by some of those things, either floods or earthquakes, right? Now, building community resilience becomes very important, because the fellows lose almost everything. So they must bounce back from that kind of. So I found studies in those areas in psychology and so forth, but none in business. Now, one of the major writings I found was actually from physics. And I discovered that in physics, there was actually a theory that was addressing strings that are subjected under some kind of pressure and then released, right, to get back to their original positions. So I picked up the concept from physics. In other words, there were very few journal articles, if any, in business, but I used literature that existed in physics, in those other areas that I've mentioned, to construct my arguments, right? And then I picked a few ideas from here and there, and I was able to put together my dissertation. I remember some of my supervisors telling me that I had concocted things that do not actually exist anywhere. But I'll tell you that after doing that work, and a few years after, and after publishing around 3 journal articles, two journal articles, I think, many people started taking interest in the area of resilience. Now, if you go to the internet, you'll find millions and millions of journal articles. So again, in such situations, you will not limit yourself. You may even review literature which is as old as 1960s, 1970s, etc., because you are constructing knowledge in an area where there is very little that is known. That is possible. Now, if you have a lot of it, well, you may consider limiting your search, right? Maybe you say, and incidentally, when you go to Google Scholar helps you do that. The moment you search using Google Scholar, it will tell you what was published in 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, etc. So you can actually tell the journal articles that you have. But you can actually consider reviewing the literature that has been published in the last 20 years, right? Or last 10 years. And that's the purpose of systematic literature review. So again, the decision is yours, depending on what is available and depending on the quality control. If you say that I've given a minimum of C, right? Those that are classified as C, but if you discover there are many, you can actually limit your search to category A and B and forget about C, or even category A alone. So I don't know whether I have answered your question, Sam, but let me hand over to Joseph and Charles. Please make sure that you continue with the debate and answer that question too. Joseph, over to you, and Charles.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you everybody who has logged in this evening. Let me confirm that you can hear me well. I seem to be, hello?
We can hear you.
Yes, I was trying to drive very fast and go and find a comfortable place, but then jam caught me up, so I decided to park somewhere. So I really, in case of any unnecessary noise, just bear with me. Again, I want to sincerely appreciate the work that Prof is doing, and more especially introducing something new and a more plausible way of reviewing literature and subsequently being able to use these literature reviews to identify gaps where you should be able to close in the future with your study. So thank you very much, Prof. And whatever thoughts I'm going to share this evening are things that I have learned from Prof. So certainly I give the credit to him. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a few things that I think Prof will again come back and emphasize before we even continue to do what I think we should be able to do today. One of them, let me set my gadget very well. One of the things that I Prof has already hinted on it, and I think he will be able to come back and again maybe emphasize on it. It is a little bit very difficult for you to be able to carry out a systematic literature review without a lot of confusion. If you begin by identifying the rather than coming up with a topic of your PhD, then you now want to review literature and you're beginning from a very small perspective. We all know that by the time you have a topic for your thesis, that is now something that has been narrowed so much that if you're even to try to look for a wider scope of literature in that area, it becomes a little bit difficult. So I think it is very critical that the first thing we do is to identify what is my area of study. Many times you've heard Prof referring to energy transition communication. So where is your area of study? Your area of study is on energy transition communication. If I'm doing simply energy transition, so that is my area of study. So whatever I'm going to do in this review, I am going to focus on energy transition as my area of study. Now, once I have identified my area of study, then now I need to figure out what is now the topic of my systematic literature review. Right. So once you are now done with your systematic literature review and you think the questions or the objectives that you had set to achieve are now achieved. Take, for example, one of the very last objectives always is that you want to identify some of the gaps that you recommend for future research. So if that was one of your objectives, so it is now from there that you now begin to think that out of these gaps that I have identified from this systematic literature review, how do I now narrow down from also the little broader topic of the systematic literature review to now a topic that I can address one or two of the gaps that you have identified. So there are three things here. Do we have the area of study? That's number one. Number two, after getting the area of the study, then you now start thinking about the topic of the systematic literature review. And then finally, once you're done with the systematic literature review and you're satisfied with the work you've done and probably with your advisor, your professor or doctor who is helping you, then from there you now begin to think about how do I narrow this even more to accommodate my thesis research. Of course, Prof will come later and probably put more light on that. And of course, as I've told you earlier, I'm only sharing ideas. A number of these things, you know them, where you think and feel that I'm out of the way, feel free to correct me. This is a learning session for all of us, myself inclusive. So many times I've seen many people tell you, okay, I want to do a systematic review, and then you're asking, well, which area? Somebody will read for you a topic which has almost 20 words, and then now from there you're like, okay, so now where is your study? What are you trying to say? So that is one of the things I thought I would share with you. A prof has labored for the last 6 or 7 hours to drive the point home, and this leaves us with quite very little to do. And I want to now begin to share my thoughts with you, and I'll basically concentrate on stage number 2 and probably part of stage number 3 of the stages that Prof has already shared with us, the stages in conducting a systematic literature review. I will focus basically on how and where do we get this data. Prof has already told us that when we are talking about data, in this case, we are talking about journal articles, and more so if it's an area where it's well studied, then we'll be really focusing on journal reviewed articles, which are primary. You know, we have journal articles, which are review articles, like some of them I'm going to be flashing once in a while. But also we have the primary articles. For example, if you went, collected your data and wrote your paper and published it, so that's a primary article because it has primary data in it, just like Professor said. So you really have to be mindful of what articles are you looking for to form your data set. Few things to note. When we are dealing with systematic literature reviews, we have some guidelines, and I wouldn't want to take time on this because you now need this much more when it comes to the actual writing of your paper. I also want to suggest that um, Prof might have to request for more time when we are able to do the actual analysis and then the actual writing of the systematic literature paper. Prof has already talked about the background. The background is a big thing, but what is it exactly inside in that background? How do you write a background that talks, a background that people read and they feel they want to continue reading and reading? What are your first statements that open that systematic review background? What are the things that must be there? How do you create space for yourself? Remember, we've said that one of the things you need to do is to really find out whether there is need for you to do the systematic review. And if you realize that there is a need, it doesn't mean that actually no reviews probably have been done in that area. It is possible that some reviews have been done, but the question now that you need to address in your mind, within your background, is that how do I create space for myself? And I was very attentive when Prof was making his submission last week, and he said, if the reviews are already done, then probably you don't need to repeat and maybe pose the same questions. But possibly you can create space for yourself by now critiquing what has already been done. And in so doing, you'll be trying to create space for yourself. Otherwise, you don't write for the sake of writing, so that you know, with the review paper, I have written, I have my supervisor, it is there. No, there are a lot of things that come in there. So these are some of the guidelines that you need. They're very handy. You need to study a document called Prisma. You need to study what are the preferred reporting items that must appear in my review and in my meta-analysis. Possibly, you also need to bear in mind that what is the population that I'm targeting? And as I said last week, that this one is borrowed from the clinical studies, where they talk about the population. In this case, we are referring to a population, but the people in the clinical area are looking at this as a problem. What is the problem? The intervention, is there anything that has been done? Can it be compared to other available interventions, if at all? And what are the possible outcomes? And I think my colleague Charles will be giving more information on this when he's making his submission. You might also need to start thinking about the sample, the phenomenon of your interest. I've already talked about your area of interest. You should now start also thinking about the design. You start about evaluation, the research type. I've already talked about the research type you're doing here. Is it a review? Is it a primary research type? So a number of these things, you might need them in the process of coming up with your systematic literature review. And when we talk about the Prisma, this is just a sample of what a Prisma guideline provides. And it gives you what must exist in your systematic literature review. But of course, this is not for now. This will come handy when you're beginning to do a write-up of your systematic literature review paper. Now, this is exactly what professors just covered. I wouldn't want to take time here, but it's critical for us to remember that sometimes protocols, just like Professor said, can be adopted. And if you look at the work of this Transfield, Davis, Crombie, and the rest of these guys you see here, they will give you a list of the stages that professor has already taken us through. Stage 1 is where we want to start with. You must plan your review. You must plan. And this begins with the trying to identify the need for the review in that particular area of your interest. I've already talked about this. And of course, preparing the proposals and then development of the review protocol, all these things Professor has already talked about. I really don't want to repeat some of these things. Now, as I said, I will concentrate and share my thoughts with you, especially in stage 2. And in stage 2, we are interested in identification of the research. And this is the research area that I was referring to. I will also focus on how do you select these studies that you're going to include in your data set, the ones you're going to review. How are you going to ensure that there is equality? What are the kind of articles, documents, or papers are we going to include in your data sets? How do you know that this is a quality research paper? What parameters can you employ to help you know that this paper here is of quality? And this takes us now to look at the sources where you're going to pick this data from. And of course, again, you must be very careful when you're talking about the assessment. For example, I might talk about quality assessment when I'm referring to the period. When was this article published? I may be talking about quality and I'm referring to what journal or which journal published this article. Imagine I have a very good article with very good information, but possibly published from a predatory journal. Or number 2, it is possible that I see this document, it has very good information, but it's not a peer-reviewed article. Somebody wrote it, battled with the journal, different publishing houses, and probably failed to meet the standards that are required, and he decides to throw it in the internet, and it's there. It is not reviewed, it's not peer-reviewed, it's not published in any journal or in any publication house, but it's there. And you think that that article could probably answer the questions that you have set out to answer in your review. And so this is very critical. Okay. Then, of course, now that I've decided to take care of the quality assessment, how do I now extract these articles? And that is where I'm going to stop. Data synthesis, my colleague will be able to throw in some light there. Then he will be able to handle a number of softwares that can help us when we are handling systematic literature review. I've already talked about this. Number 1 is for us to be able to know what is my study area. Today I was chatting with a friend and was telling me my study area is in enterprise resilience. He was trying to read for me his topic and I told him stop there. That is your area of research. He was trying to read his whole topic as his area of systematic literature review. I told him no, the rest you'll add later. For now, you will focus on enterprise resilience. That is your area of study. Others you will add later. Now, you may see what I have on the screen. I will try to highlight some few things. I marked some areas in those 2 papers that were published by Professor and the team. You'll find that in that topic there of that systematic literature review, The area in the first section top there is household transition, energy transition. That is the study area. You need to have that. In the second paper, you see there again published by professor and the team, you see that we have adaptive behaviors. For now, where we are testing the adaptive behaviors does not matter for now. Not until that point when you are now beginning to look for the articles. It's now when you want to look at some of the things and say, okay, then I must narrow. It's now adaptive behaviors where in education. Because now if you've gone to the net and you've tested some of the things, you put adaptive behavior and you are having millions of hits, then you know that this is a widely researched area. I cannot be able to go through all the thousands of things. Let me now narrow and look at adaptive behaviors, but in education sector, for example. So this is very critical that when you're beginning to think about doing a systematic literature review, can we have a clear focus on where we are going to do our systematic literature review? Now, so we see here, we decide now on steps that we are going to employ. And of course, we are going to talk about, we have already talked about location of studies. I've talked about selection and evaluation. We talked of analysis and synthesis, and then reporting. These are the things the professor has talked about. My concern now is, where do I find these papers? The first thing I have put here is from the electronic databases, and these professors talked about. What are these electronic databases? Of course, these are databases that contain publication houses. At some point, I will show you what I'm talking about. If you go to Emerald, Emerald is a database. When you go to Springer, Springer is a database. When you go to Science Direct, Science Direct is a database. This is where you're going to do your search and be able to see whether what you are interested in is found in those areas. Now, you must also have a justification for choosing Emerald, for choosing Springer, and leaving out Science Direct. You should be able to explain why you think Emerald is a better place for you to find the articles rather than Science Direct. Now, it is also good, but not compulsory. Maybe professor will be able to throw in more light there. It's also very good for you to visit at least 2 or 3 databases as you look for the articles that you're going to include in your data set. Within these databases, as we shall see shortly, there are journal houses, publishing houses, which we call the journals. And if you're very good in your IT, you can be able to see all these journals and then decide and instruct the database or the search engine that I only need articles from journal houses A, B, C, D. And then you instruct the journal, you'll be able to see the articles from actually only those journal houses. How do I qualify the journals? Again, my colleague will be able to take us through some of those things. But one, you should be able to look for journals that are not predatory. I cannot tell you that you need a journal article with a citation factor or score and impact factor of probably 10 or beyond, or that is a bit subjective. But the best I can tell you is to be very careful. There is always a list. I think eventually I would request Charles to try to locate some of these Excel sheets with the predator journals. so that you want to finish your systematic review after a lot of sleepless nights. Then they'll tell you that the articles that you have here do not make sense because they are from predatory journals. All right. Before we go to the practical part, we could now see that when you have now been able to see where you're going to pick these journal articles, you can now again talk about the selection and evaluation of studies, just like Professor has said. Now, in order for us to be able to do that, first, remember you have your questions that you want to address, and probably you can see some of them here for some of these papers that we're able to do. You have your questions in there. So now probably you need to set your criterion for the selection of your articles. Which articles do I pick? Which articles do I leave out? If I've chosen to pick these articles, how do I pick them from thousands of the articles? And I want to give an example here that you can see. This is one of the papers that is published, and just on top there, as you can see, on adaptive behaviors. So we ask ourselves, if we are to talk about adaptive behavior, and if we are to review papers on adaptive behavior, what will be our limits? So we ask ourselves, and then we say, okay, first, pre-qualification number one is that that paper must be peer-reviewed. And you can now see that this is our first pre-qualification. That for any paper to qualify in our process, systematic review process, it must be peer-reviewed. Again, and I say this with a lot of caution, that for us in our review, we said not only should these articles be peer-reviewed, but also they should be written in English. And I say this with a lot of caution. Why? Because these days we have softwares that can actually translate any article from whatever language it is written to English. So you must also be able to give a justification for why you think the paper must be written in English. And this is something which you need to think about. And for us here, the idea is that in the process of translating, probably some vital information we are interested in is lost. And that is our justification, for example. We are also saying that, and this probably partly answers the question of Dr. Austin. We are saying that we are interested in articles published between 2000 and 2002. Now, in the event that we have some very important information from a renowned scholar who has done a lot of work in the area of adaptive behavior, and it was published in 1990, for example, we should be able to adjust, just like Prof had said. We should be able to adjust and make sure that information in that article is captured. Now, but again, we have also said that such articles that are aimed at assessing adaptive behavior, performance, work outcomes, etc., are the ones that we will include in this study. The opposite is true if you look at this table, that non-peer-reviewed articles or journals are excluded. So that's why I'm saying the opposite is true. Now, in this case, and again, I make this statement with a bit of caution, for us, we are saying we are not going to consider book chapters. Why? Is probably we have gone out there in the literature, in the internet, and we have seen that we have enough. We have enough. We have so much written in this area, but then there is less that has been written in terms of review. And so for us, we say we don't need to review the book chapters. We don't even need to review magazines and conference papers. But for your case, it could be different. I want to confirm that we are still together. I might end up going and going and going when I've left the class behind.
Joseph, we are together, but can
Yeah,
I
we're
add
together.
on bullet number 2?
Yes, Prof.
Articles published between 2000 and 2022. As you said, certainly partially this bullet answers Dr. Austin. But if you look at the topic, we had adaptive behaviors before and after COVID-19. So between 2000 and 2019 or 2018, we are talking about the period before COVID-19. And then between 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, that is after. And we're actually comparing these adaptive behaviors. But the review can be for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, depending on what you want to achieve at the end of the day. Over to you, Joseph.
Very much, Prof. Certainly, that is it. I wouldn't want to add anything more. That is it. Of course, I've also put something here, which is where I started from. You need to have the questions. The questions will dictate what you are going to look for in the paper. Certainly, we are not going to read this paper like the way we read in newspapers. We are going to read this paper with intention. The intention is to pick information that will answer the questions that you have set out to answer. Right. So for us to be able to do that, for us to be able to get those papers that we are talking about from those different journals, for us to be able to do that, we must be able to pick the Boolean words. We must be able to sit and carefully select the words or such words or such strings that are going to help you to try to exhaust what is available. So you're not going just to say, okay, for me, I am just going to put this word, that's okay. No, no, no. You're going to carefully sit and decide that if I want to pick information about enterprise resilience, which words am I going to use? Which words will help me pick this information? For example, this is again one of the papers Prof and the team published. So we set out to ask ourselves, we are talking about household energy transition, but how do we pick these papers? So we sit down and select possible words or statements, short statements, such terms, Boolean terms, that we can put in the search engine there, and then we'll be able to see if we collect as many as possible journal articles that we are interested in. That will help us answer the questions that we want to answer. So in this case, we have a number of journal articles here, and I want to just probably in your own time, you look at them. These papers are available online. You can be able to go and pick them and then read. But here, we are saying that for this study, the search was done using the following Boolean expressions. So the first thing we put in the database or in the search engine is household energy transition. Now imagine that we have selected 3 different databases that we are going to search the information from. So we put household energy transition in Emerald, Then we do the same in Science Direct. We do the same in Google Scholar. Why are we repeating this? We think that there are possibly some articles that are in Google Scholar and they are not in Emerald. And so for us to be sure that we have exhausted what we want to get, then we are putting this in all these different databases that we have selected. Once we are done with that, then we move to the next search term: energy transition and households. Charles, as you come in, you will also help us understand when we say and is in capital letters, what are we telling the system to do for us? We are saying energy transition and households, but the and is in capital letters, right? Now, so you need to have words which are connected. Don't just pick anything and put that. They must be connected. And I remember professors saying that at some point, you might need even to go and look for the synonyms. For example, when you look at a household and residential, they are very close. So if I'm looking for the articles that are talking about energy transition in households, it is possible that I can easily get similar information when I say energy transition or residential energy transition or energy transition and residential. So if I put these words separately as they are, it is possible that I could easily pick different papers, but speaking to the same. Again, what do I do when I'm searching? I will now introduce what we call all in text and all in title. And this will be the operators that I'll be using to simply help me capture some of the information that I'm actually interested in. Eventually, when I'm doing my data collection, I need to have a table like this. And this is part of the table that professor was talking about. When I go to Google Scholar, I use the word or the phrase household energy transition. What do I get when I put it the first time? And when I started to filter, what do I get? Now I have all in text and I have all in title. When I say all in text, I'm telling the system that get for me any article that has the phrase household energy transition. It doesn't matter whether it's in the title or it is in the references or it is in the middle or it is in the methodology. I am just telling the system, get for me any article which has household energy transition. Remember, the quotes are not there. But when I put the quotes, the story changes. Again, my colleague will be talking about that. But when I say I am only looking for all in title, it means I'm telling the system that get for me these articles, but I want this phrase here, household energy transition, to appear on the title. Why am I saying so? It is because I know once this word is in the title, it means this is what this person was studying. But if it's in his references, it means it is one of the papers that he quoted. And so that paper may not give me what I want. So that's why I'm now beginning to remove them. I'm now beginning to sieve those that have what I want. And we'll be seeing that shortly. Okay. So eventually, when I'm done filling that table on top, the outcome of that table is now what enters in this figure. This figure now is telling you that I went to the Web of Science, I went to Science Direct, I went to Google Scholar, But while I was in the Web of Science, I saw there are 565,000 articles. When I was in Science Direct, I saw there are 77,000 articles. And when I was in Google Scholar, I saw there are 37,000 articles. When I add all this, I now realize that actually in this area, there is something to do with the energy transition, giving me the hits of about 681,000. But I want you to remember one thing. I said that when I was doing it, it was all in text, meaning that the system got for me any article which had that word. It doesn't matter where it was. It could have been in the reference, it could have been somewhere in the title, it could have even been in probably the name of the journal. So this figure here should not excite me. I need now to begin to streamline this and say, I must see all these phrases I'm talking about. They must be appearing on the title and they must be appearing on the abstract. And when I go back to repeat the process using this procedure, you can now see the articles falling down from 681,000 to 785. Now, when I become even serious now in my sieving, I now start imagining that, but it is possible that the same papers I saw in Emerald could also be existing in Science Direct, could also be existing in Google Scholar. So how do I make sure that I am not just wasting time with repeated papers? Again, my colleague will be taking us through how we can do that online. So I eliminate all those ones, I screen them out, and then I remain with only 96 articles. And I read those ones religiously with the intention to answer the questions. And when I read and cross-examine properly, I noticed that only 55 of these papers can answer the questions that we set out to answer. And therefore, we do our synthesis on those few articles. Now, allow me, unless somebody has any question, and allow me take you through a process where we are going to do the search, which is going to take us about 10 or 15 minutes, then my colleague will come in. But up to this point, if you have any question that you think may be answered, I want to give you the opportunity, and I want to invite the professor again to make a few comments as we also ask some questions. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Joseph Elasu. I hope we've been following. I think every aspect that he has presented and discussed is very relevant. And as you can see, the job that you do at this level will actually make you an expert, somebody who is knowledgeable in a particular area, because you know how far knowledge has actually advanced. And what we're doing here is actually more or less synthesizing and examining the information presented. So don't forget the approaches, the Prisma, right? And I think we'll be coming to that later on, the Pico and the Spider, right? And maybe the other thing that Joseph asked me to comment about was the databases. Your search will not be complete if you do not visit at least 2 databases. Yes, you have the journals, that is very fine, but make sure that you visit the electronic databases. He has given you an example of Emerald, Springer, Science Direct, Google Scholar, and so forth. At least we must have 2 databases, electronic databases. Over to you, Joseph, so that I don't really waste much time, unless somebody has a question.
Thank you very much, Prof. And Prof has always talked about a table. And
Joseph,
so, yes,
I have a question.
please ask.
In your exclusion criteria, you had literature review articles. So I was wondering, what are those and why are you excluding them?
Prof, would you like to respond to this? Okay, I think Prof could be having some challenges. Now, when you go to the internet, you'll find two types of journal articles. There is a journal article called a literature review article, like the one you are going to publish. Then there is a primary journal article, original article. Like now, you're going to collect your data, and then you're going to write a paper and publish it. Now, that is not a review article. That one is original article. But now this paper, like the one we have written, which is online, this one that we are quoting here, that one is called a review article. So you wouldn't want to review a review article. You want to review primary articles. So if you go to the internet, then you see there is a paper written by Professor Joseph Ntayi, and it is a systematic literature review. You can only quote it, but it does not form part of your data set as the papers you're going to review, because it's a review article. But again, some advanced studies also go and review literature review articles. So, but I think that is not for us. That could be for other people probably, but may not be for us for now. I don't know if I've tried to answer your question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've got it.
Thank you. I don't know whether Prof is there to make any comment. If not, we could now share this and then move to do something practical.
Proceed.
Thank you very much, Prof. So maybe before I go and share this, this is part of the table that Prof was talking about. I've just taken a screenshot, but eventually Charles will be able to show us how you can generate this from a software. But again, if you are not able to generate this from a software, and if you think using a software can disturb you, you can as well do it manually and smartly, and you not have any problem. But of course, it's also okay to know that we have tools that can help us do the work much easily. Okay, so let me now unshare this, and then we look at something else. Let me see. Okay. Let me now go to. Let me unshare this. Okay, now I'm just going to share my screen here. I guess you can now all see my screen.
Yeah, we are seeing.
I'm going to demonstrate something small. I am going to use some of the such strings that we used to really demonstrate how do we get these articles. And I'm going to be brief so that I can give my colleague time. But again, maybe I'll request that Prof, probably if possible, could have 1 or 2 more sessions if people are really would benefit in terms of being able to write a paper. This time may not be enough for us. So, so this is my Google space, and I want to go to Science Direct, for example. So I just go to Science Direct, and I am there. Now, I go back to my book where I'm writing where I've written my search engines. My search terms. And then I also now have my table, the one I showed you, where I am now writing the hits that I'm going to see. So I am going here and I'm going to type here, I'm going to type here digital farming. I've already seen there digital farming. Let me just write digital farming. That could be one of my search terms. I don't know what yours are, but what I'm trying to demonstrate here is the procedure. I have decided that for me, I am going to use Science Direct as one of the databases. And my reason is Science Direct is one of the widely used database by different scholars for searching, meaning that there is trust for this database. Number two, it is possible that the database has a collection of so many journals that are trustworthy. In number three, it's possible that this database has so many publications, and so it is a rich database. So now I go, my first search term or search string is digital farming. So I say search. So you can now see my screen. I have told the system that go and look for me any paper, any publication that has digital farming. So to put 22,000 articles. So I go to my table now, and then I go and look for that section for Science Direct. Under Science Direct, I look for that section that I put all in text. So I record this figure. But now I ask myself, is this information that I've got, does it lead me to what I'm looking for? What if this system has given me articles which have just digital farming in the reference? Or digital farming is just appearing once in the middle of the paper. Does that qualify this paper to form part of my data set? So I say, let me again go and do further assessment on this. So I go to advanced search. You can now see I'm now on advanced search. And I tell the system that I'm interested in papers which have digital farming in both either in the title or in the abstract or in the author specific keywords. Remember, when you're writing a paper, there's always some space down there where you put keywords. So I'm saying that this information, digital farming, should appear either on the title, or if not in the title, I should at least meet it in the abstract. If not in the abstract, at least I should see it in the author specific keywords. So I put it there. Remember, in the first place here, find articles with these terms. Here, I am not specific. Find articles with these terms. Now I'm specific. I'm saying find articles where this word or this phrase digital farming should be either in the title or in the abstract or in the author specific words or in any space around there. So I will now say search for me. You see what I have? From the 22,000, I am now writing this figure in my table, and I'm now looking for where a space where I'm recording information in relation to the title, abstract, and the keywords. Of course, in my table that I showed you, I only have title. I did not include this. Now, again, I am saying that what if I'm interested that these papers, I mean, this information is a must. It has to be there on the title. So I also copy this and put there on title. Now I go back here. I am free. Here I am beginning to restrict, and here I'm restricting. And now I'm saying search. You can now see those are the papers that I will be able to see when I say this word must appear on the title. And you can now see this one here. This is the title, I have digital farming. This is the title, I have digital farming. This is the title, I have digital farming. You can now see. So I can now confirm that this information is in this paper, and it's possible that this author or these authors were writing about digital farming. Now, I go ahead and download these 18 articles and put them somewhere. But remember that this is now much more restricted. It is possible that I can still remove this digital farming from title. And I go back and again examine this 332 and see if I look around, if I can get some other articles that are speaking the same that I may include in my data set. So instead of only getting 18 articles, because you are seeing the number is little, so you again go back and say, okay, maybe let me go again and check if I can find something that fits within what I'm looking for. You do that. Now, this process must be repeated using different key words. Now here I've only used digital farming because that was my first key word. Now allow me ask Charles, give us another word from your study other than digital farming that we could demonstrate using.
Precision agriculture. Precision agriculture.
Precision agriculture. I hope that's the right spelling for precision. Now, precision agriculture. Remember, here I already have some restrictions here. So I have to first remove all of them. When I remove them, you see what I have. This is what I have. 125,000 hits. But these hits should not excite you, because it is possible that precision agriculture is appearing maybe in the reference. And so you have to now begin to restrict this so that you are able to select articles that can answer your questions. Remember, the driver here is the questions that you have set out to answer. So let's go and restrict this one, and I think I'll be ending with this one. So I'm taking it to abstract and title, and then I'm telling the system that check for me this, and it checks, and it gives me 3,000. I recorded this. Remember why I'm recording all this information is because it's supposed to appear in the flow chart diagram that I showed you, the other diagram. That information must enter there. So that is the reason why you're recording. It's a requirement by the Prisma that you must have that kind of a flow chart. And this is the information that goes there. So you are not recording these things just for fun. They form part of what must appear in your paper. So let's do it one more time. Can we restrict it to the title? And then we go and then we say search for us. I have 332. And that means Charles has a lot of work now here. Imagine 312 articles have the word precision agriculture on the top, on the topic. And so Charles now has to download possibly all these 312 articles, but good enough Charles is an IT man. It's not going to be like me who's going to download them and put them somewhere. Charles will just direct them to go to somewhere. Then from there, he deals with them from there. But for some of us who probably have issues with IT, we download them and put them somewhere. Then we start managing them from there. Now, so this now takes us to a total of 18 articles plus 312. We are now seeing 330 articles that you must read. At least read all the abstracts. Now, I told you that the publication, the database contains journals. The database also contains the type of papers that are present. Rochelle, are you with us?
Yes, please.
I want to answer your question now, practically.
Yes, I'm here.
You see this review article? Are you seeing it?
Yes.
We are not interested in these ones because there are already literature review articles. So we want the research articles, the original. Much as Charles has 312 articles here, what qualifies in his data set is 229. The encyclopedia is also here if he's interested in it. Book chapters are also here if he's interested, and a lot more here. You can see all these mini reviews, short communication, ABC, they are all here. So for example, I can choose to say that system, give me only research articles. I click on it and see they are there, 229.
Okay.
I have also told you that we also have subject areas. Where is Chelsea's research residing in? If it's in agriculture, do I look for subject area here? And I see it is here in agriculture, so I come here. You see, out of 332, we are no longer talking about 332. We are now talking about 141 because this is what resides with, means the papers reside in this area of agriculture where Charles' interest is. Now, where do we get this? If I undo this and I undo the rest, I'll be able to see here. I should be able to see different journals. But then for Charles, all these articles are found in open access. They are here. But let's go back as I wind up. I am sorry, I'm taking a lot of time. Let's go back to our first search. Was on let me take you to energy transition. I don't know if this can allow me just 2 minutes. I want to put here energy efficiency, for example, and I search. So there are more than 1,000 hits, there are too many. But the publication houses is what I'm interested in. I don't know why I'm not able to see a number of them, but I should be able to see them here. But they are put on open access. I should be able to see publication journals, but I think there are some adjustments I need to make on my system so that I'm able to see. You can see actually here, they're actually here. Journals are here actually. This is what I was interested in. These are the journals, these ones here. You see, all these are the journals. Journal of Cleaner Production, for example. You see, all those articles on energy efficiency. About 1,269 journals, articles are published from this Journal of Cleaner Production. So with this, you are able now to collect your articles and then you'll be able to put them somewhere where you'll be able to manage them and begin to synthesize them, read them, and then eventually put them on your catalog. When I talk about the catalog, I'm talking about a matrix that Charles will be able to show us in detail. I really want to stop here. I have taken a lot of time, but allow me again take this back to Prof for any comments. Then probably Charles will come in and introduce what he's supposed to do. And then probably, if time allows, like if you can allow, we'll have another lecture where we'll do a lot about managing the data using different softwares, and then also how do we analyze this information that you have put on in your catalog. Thank you very much, Prof, and back to you for comments.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for that very elaborate presentation and discussion. Possibly, I would like to hear from the participants, because my thinking is that time doesn't seem to be on our side, and for us to be able to do a good job, I wanted to request for 2 more sessions. Do you think, Rochelle, that will be wise, or we close?
Oh, Prof, no.
Because I wanted to request for 2 more sessions, and these 2 sessions are probably will be next week.
Yes.
That is, last time we met on Monday, is that right?
Yes.
Monday and Friday. So can we use
Yes.
Monday and Friday just to close up this thing called systematic literature review? And then if there is anything else that you would like us to handle, then you can request us. We shall do it.
Yes,
and maybe Joseph, without really rushing Charles, I wanted us to leave Monday for Charles, or probably yourself, and then Charles comes in on Friday. But I know Charles has a lot. So we probably give Charles Monday and Friday, and we'll be coming in just to add a few things here and there. Charles, I don't know whether you are very happy with that.
Yeah, I think that is spot on, because I was wondering how I was going to begin a session after 2 hours. It was something that was practical, and yet our intention is for people to learn. So I think that's a great proposal.
But is it possible also, Charles, to tell us some of the software packages that we should think of having on our laptops? I know last time we used the EndNote. Can you briefly, maybe in about 5 minutes, just tell them the softwares they should have, and then thereafter we can we can give them time to ask questions. Charles, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Prof. A good evening to everybody who is on call. And maybe as we start, I want to just ask, just to be sure, on whatever you're seeing on the screen, is there anything that you are familiar with, and what do you use it for, if you're familiar with any of those? You could put up your hand and let me know. If you see anything that you are familiar with on the screen, that I've shown on the screen, that's those logos you see there. Yes, Chibale, starting with Chibale.
Yes, I'm familiar with Mendeley.
What do you use it for?
I use it for referencing. That is when I'm looking for particular articles, and I'll save them in Mendeley. And then it will help me for referencing, in-text referencing, and also for creating the reference at the end of the report or research report or bibliography. So it helps me quite, and it comes in handy.
Great, great. Petros, which one do you use? Is it also Mendeley?
No, I use Zotero.
Tell us about it.
Well, it also helps me, just like what Chiwale says, where I after I've downloaded my articles, then I can be able to, as long as I go to that article and I synchronize it with my Word document. So each time I open my library on Zotero and I click on it, it automatically gives me the inside citation and also into the bibliography.
Great. Priscilla Gardner.
Thank you very much, sir. So for me, I also use Mendeley, and just like other speakers have earlier alluded to, I use it for in-text referencing and also searching. Thanks, sir.
Great. How about the rest of us? What do we use? Is there something that is not displayed there that you use? You could tell us. Odong James? Your network seems to be bad. James, your network is not
we
working.
do manually. I'm saying, sorry for that.
Yeah.
I was saying, I haven't yet learned the software, but I do it manually.
What do you mean? Can you explain what manual means?
Just collect them in Word, and then you follow the format you want to use for referencing.
You say you collect them in Word and then follow the format to reference.
Yes, like APA format.
Okay. So you ideally type the names, their reference in each and said, okay, Odongo at 2002 manually. Is that what you say?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for your feedback, for those who have given us the feedback. So like you've seen from what Joseph has shared, we are talking about hundreds of articles, and that means if you are to refer to most of those, that means there's a number of references or in citations. So it can become really a daunting task. And the reason for these tools that I've showed here, like the colleagues that have shared about the Zotero and Mendeley and many others, all these, they are really meant to make your work easier when it comes to managing the references, managing the content as such. So, and this is part of the things that we are going to look at. And specifically, we are going to choose. Of course, we can't do all, and there are preferences for the people, and it may be good for you to explore and see how many of them work, so that you choose the one that works for you. And some universities specify, but you can choose your own. But I also wanted to say, beginning with a comment on Odongo, even when you look at basic applications like Microsoft Word, and some of you, I think many of us are familiar with some form of automated referencing in citations and then doing the reference lists. You can be able to do using even some of the tools like Microsoft Word. And personally, that is what I had initially mastered. And I was very comfortable with it because I could actually do, it would automate those processes and I would do it. And but one of the times I was interacting with another colleague who is studying in another university, and she saw what I was doing, how I was doing. She said, man, why don't you try Mendeley? And I asked, but if I can do everything here in my Word, why do I need to go to Mendeley? And but I made an effort and went there, and I discovered that there are some of the possibilities, some of the flexibility that I got from Mendeley compared to me doing in Word. But of course, I normally tell people that depends on your preference. And then, of course, the other handy tool when it comes to these tools is what Joseph was in his presentation. You saw him talking about a spreadsheet, matrix. He was talking about a matrix. And for you to be able to do some kind of analysis on whatever you have done, on whatever information you have collected, you need some basic application, data analysis application, and Excel is one of that perfect one that you can be able to do that. So in the next session, possibly next week, we are going to take some time and look through mainly. And I will co-present on this, especially I'm happy that I have about 3 or 4 people who are already using it. So it will make the learning process much better and can help we can co-present because you live it and you're familiar with it. But one of the things that we will want to do is to stretch it beyond citing, in-text citing, and just giving us the list. Because with Mendeley, once you have done the in-citing and you have already launched the table of references, it comes automatically. As soon as you enter the in-citing, it comes automatically. There's no more work to do. But one of the things that I would want to do to share with you is to see how we can actually use Mendeley to help us to read, to identify the relevant content that we will be able to pick as part of our literature review. When you're talking about the synthesis, how do you extract that information from there? It can really be a daunting task to read 200 articles. I met last week, early this week, I met a colleague of mine who was studying in the university and was telling me that he was doing literature review and was telling me now, so far, for the last 3-4 weeks, he has been reading. He has only managed to read 8 articles. And he said they are big. I read and sometimes I don't understand. So it can really be a daunting task. So we're going to look at mainly how do we leverage on Mendeley, tools in Mendeley to support us in reading. So we'll be able to do that. Of course, in addition to things like duplicates, removing duplicates. Of course, you saw what Elasto was doing. He was picking articles from different databases. But you know, many of those articles, some of them are replicated. They are resident in different databases, but they can be they could be the same. So once you have some of these tools like Mendeley, they help you automatically to know which articles are the same, even when they have different names, for it to check and know which ones are the same and has the capacity to help you eliminate all those duplications. And from the Prisma diagram that Joseph was talking about, you will be able to record. There is an option where you're supposed to indicate, okay, you brought this, but how many did you remove? So with Mendeley, once you have dropped everything there, you can be able to get that number easily. If you are to do it manually, it might be a very hectic process. So we are going to do this. We are going to use this. And what I want you to do, each of us, I want you to go to www. Not now, later on, before the next lecture, www.mendeley.com. I want you to go and download the desktop version of Mendeley. Download it, and so that I want you to download it, either Windows, if you're using Windows, if you're using Mac, whatever, get your version. Make sure that you have downloaded it and it's integrated in your Microsoft Word. And 2, in that very site, please go and create an account there. The beauty about Mendeley is that when you create an account, even tomorrow when you lose your computer, you will log into another one and to be able to pull. Once you have installed your Mendeley desktop version, it will make sure that all your things will come automatically. You don't want to lose your precious hard-worked articles just because the laptop has collapsed or it has been stolen. So the task is all of us, let's have Mendeley installed. Let's just create an account on Mendeley online version. Let's make sure that we have desktop version on your computer before the next meeting. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much, Charles. And Dr. Mwangi, may I ask you to close, please? Dr. Mwangi. Okay, it doesn't seem to be there. Maybe my friend now let me see. Unia, why don't you close? Unia, I have seen Unia Musasi's. Unia Musasi's, please close our session.
Thank you, Prof. I had the feeling you were going to choose me. Good evening, Prof. Good evening, members. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, Elasso. Thank you very much, Olupot, for removing cobwebs from our brains. We are really grateful. We thank you, the energy class, for allowing us to fluke your class. But I believe we are all in the same boat, so we need to learn. I believe we are all a step ahead from where we were when we joined. So we are really grateful, Prof, for giving us insightful issues concerning literature review and systematic literature review. Thank you very much. And can I pray as we close?
It's okay.
Father in heaven, I thank you very much for this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to learn. Thank you for the heart that you have given Prof, Elasso and Olupot to give us insight on systematic literature review. I pray as the students who are online that we may understand and put into practice what they are teaching us, so that we can be able to accomplish this milestone on time. Bless them all, bless us all, those who are yet to get home, give them a safe journey. In Jesus' name I've prayed. Amen.
Amen and good night.
Amen.
Thank you very much and good
Amen.
night.
Thank you, Prof.
Amen. Let me go and break my fast.
Thank you so much. That's been